Some of the biggest news that came out from last week has of course been the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank. Now, that's caused a lot of media hype, a lot of fear, uncertainty within the marketplace because people still remember 2008 when we had our previous banking crisis. So what I thought I would do in this video is not only give you guys my quick thoughts on the bank collapse, but also tell you guys how I think this is going to impact the Boston real estate market. Because if you've seen my content, you know that I'm a huge believer in Boston. You know I believe it's incredibly economically resilient. So I'll give you guys my thoughts as to whether there'll be an impact, whether you should continue to buy real estate, and what else you need to know. So with that, let's get at it. What's going on, guys? My name is Lior, and welcome back to my channel. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of the video, two super quick things, guys. Number one, if this is your first time on my channel, first of all, welcome. I'm a real estate agent here in the Boston area. And number two, guys, if you're thinking about doing anything at all with real estate, whether you're buying, selling, investing, whatever it may be, me and my team get so many calls from you guys watching our videos every single week. So if you're thinking about doing anything, make sure you hit us up and we will definitely help you out. So with that, let's get right into the meat and potatoes and talk about this pretty epic collapse at Silicon Valley Bank. So first of all, I'm not gonna pretend to be like some banking expert here. Obviously, if you guys have watched my channel, you know I talk a lot about real estate, but because banking and real estate are so inextricably linked together, I did quite a bit of research to try and really understand what happened and the potential fallout from it. And to put a really quick summary on it, I'm not going to go into all the details. You guys can of course do your own research, but basically what ended up happening was 2022 was a really crappy year for tech companies, right? And Silicon Valley Bank works with a lot of tech companies. These companies didn't raise as much money as they have in years past, so the bank's deposits have gone down, right? So when customers needed withdrawals, which was of course in the many billions, the bank essentially had to sell some of their own assets, which included treasury bonds and other kind of bonds that they had bought. They took a big loss. It basically scared a lot of the venture capitalists that work a lot with these tech companies. These VCs advised their customers to go withdraw their cash from the bank, and essentially the bank did not have enough cash, right? And so basically what ended up happening was that the bank ended up having a pretty significant liquidity issue, right? Because all these companies ran, part of the advice of their VCs, try to take their deposits out. The bank obviously, of course, was not ready for all their major clients to come and get their money. So they ran into a ton of trouble. And, one of the big things that stuck out to me about this particular banking crisis, and again, if any of you guys are banking experts and you have other opinions, feel free to shoot them below. But one thing that really stuck out to me is that this was definitely more of a liquidity issue for the bank rather than equity issue. And what I mean is, it's clear that it was just a bad run of VCs all advising their clients to all go in at once, right, to withdraw their money, where the bank just didn't have the liquidity to cover all those withdrawals, right? Because the bank, like any other bank, invests the customers' deposits, and they just did not have liquidity on hand to essentially have those deposits for the customers. And, it seems pretty clear if there wasn't this kind of really big spike in run-on and deposit withdrawals, that the bank actually had quite a bit of assets that they could eventually sell to, liquidate and eventually make up deposits. So basically my point is, it sounds like it was just a big runoff in liquidity rather than a true inherent issue in the equity side of the bank. So now that I kind of got all that stuff out about the bank and kind of, my high level takeaways from reading the articles, let's kind of actually dig into and see how does this potentially impact the real estate market and, of course, more specifically, the Boston area real estate market. And if we're going to be talking about the Boston market, we have to talk about the big thing, which is the supply and demand. So let's start with the demand side, right? So in terms of demand, the demand for real estate in the Boston market is still astronomically high, right? The Boston market still attracts people moving here every single day from all over the country, for people moving here for school, education, healthcare, job opportunities, and all of our different industries, right? I mean, we have a ton of demand, and that demand has been existing, right? This is not like a new thing. I mean, this has been going on since the 2010s. We had one of the previous Boston mayors wrote a report about just how much demand there is in the Boston market, and his forecast for that. I mean, that demand is still very, very much here. Now, the second side of the equation that we have to talk about is the supply. And honestly, the supply side is what kind of gives me the most comfort in the Boston market, right? Because the supply is historically low. And there's a couple of reasons for it, right? Number one, we don't see a lot of people retrading properties, right? So what I mean by that is, a lot of the supply that typically comes in the market is people selling their homes to potentially trade up, right? Let's say they're having a bigger family, they're gonna go buy a bigger house, or maybe trade down because maybe, kids went off to college, so they're gonna go get a smaller place. But the issue is we are not seeing a lot of that. And the reason is actually kind of obvious, right? Because, interest rates have spiked way up over the last year or so. And a lot of people that bought homes over the last several years locked in rates in, the 3 and 4% range. So it doesn't really make sense for them to go and buy a new home, put a new mortgage at 6, 6.5, or even 7%, right? I mean, unless you absolutely have to sell and you really need that new house, you're probably thinking pretty hard, like, does it make sense for me to sell my house, get rid of this 3% mortgage to go get a 6.5, 7% mortgage? You know what? I might just wait, right? And that is happening really, really frequently today, right? People don't want to get rid of their existing debt that is at really, really attractive interest rates. So that's kind of reason number one. Reason number two that we're not seeing as much supply is also due to the interest rates, and that's what has been preventing new construction product from coming online, right? Because if you've been following the market, you know that for developers, over the last year or two, there's been a huge run on not only construction costs, right? I mean, construction costs have obviously gone through the roof, but now because of the high interest rates, that's actually killed a lot of development projects, right? Because now the developers' costs are, borrowing costs are much higher. So for a lot of them, they can't pencil out a lot of the projects that they were penciling out, 12, 24, 36 months ago. So there's going to be less new product supply coming on the market. So basically we have less existing supply coming on the market, and we have less new supply coming on the market. And if you look at the data, the supply so far this year in 2023 has literally been like so low. I mean, if you compare even the supply from last spring, I mean, we are, I saw data that we were at about 30% of inventory from last year. I mean, there is just literally no supply. And if you're house hunting, you've probably seen that, right? You're probably, getting updates, on Zillow, Realtor.com, or from your real estate agent, right? And you're probably seeing like, wow, there's just not a lot of new options coming on the market. And that's 100% driven by these two reasons that we're talking about. So how will the impact of Silicon Valley Bank affect those two sides of the equation? Honestly, I'm not sure we're going to see a major effect at this point, right? Now, look, obviously, if, we, over the next several months or year, whatever, we start seeing more bank failures, and there's going to, that's obviously going to be a whole nother conversation. If the issues are kind of really stemming from the Silicon Valley Bank because of, what happened with the tech companies, and it's kind of more of a tech industry specific issue, then we might not see as much fallout, right? I mean, there's probably going to be maybe a little bit less demand, right? Because Boston certainly has a strong foothold with technology, and there's a lot of people here that have high-paying jobs that work in the tech space. One of you guys watching this video might be one of you guys. And, if you all of a sudden there's a ton of uncertainty in the industry, right? Because now all of a sudden everyone's kind of freaking out, not sure about financing structures. Yeah, if I was a tech employee, maybe I'm not going to go get a huge new personal expense, and go buy a house, right? Maybe I'm going to continue to rent for a little bit longer, just until there's a little bit more stability in the industry, right? So, maybe we see a little bit less demand from the tech side. But again, this is kind of the beauty of the Boston real estate market, right? Is we are so diverse economically. We have so many different industries here that even if one industry takes a hit, I mean, we've literally got plenty of other industries that are all humming along, doing really well, right, that are likely going to continue to fuel real estate demand. And one last thing I'll throw out there, just for you guys that are like really super worried. In 2008, a lot of you guys might be thinking about 2008, right, because we obviously had a couple of banks collapse at that point. one thing I will throw out is, the Boston real estate market actually was incredibly resilient, right? Because again, we've just got the capital here. We've got a lot of wealth. We've got a lot of industries. We've got a lot of people with good paying jobs in a big spectrum of different industries. So in 2008, we were pretty resilient to the shock that was going through the country. And honestly, I would probably expect similar kind of path if there was going to be any additional turbulence that's going to be caused from this banking collapse, right? Because, one of the things we know that when there's uncertainty in the financial environment, investors or people that have capital typically look for safe alternatives, right? And what kind of better safe alternative is there than probably one of the most desirable, one of the sturdiest, real estate markets in really the whole country, if not the world, right? And that leads to Boston. So, I actually expect that there might be some people really shuffling funds for maybe higher risk equities or higher risk investments into Boston real estate, which year over year for the last so many years has continued to provide steady yearly returns. That's kind of my take on, SVB and its impact on the real estate market. Of course, we'll see how it plays out, but just given the history of, the Boston real estate market, given the economic strength of it, I don't know if we're going to necessarily see any major recourse. I think the market's going to remain to be very competitive just because of the supply side, like we talked about. So those are my 2 cents, guys. So hopefully, if you were in a little bit of a panic, this kind of makes you feel better, right? Because I think the economic factors are here and they kind of tell a pretty clear story. So hopefully that helps, guys. Of course, like always, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments below and I will definitely help you out.